Good morning. It is December 13th. Something that's been going through my mind recently is, am I serving the things that I see around me? Are my actions and the steps that I'm taking in life, are they serving the things that I see in front of me and the things that I see other people partake in that may have succeeded for them? Am I serving those things, or am I serving things that I know I'm called to, or serving my purpose? Or you could look at it as enacting the sequence of events through actions that will inevitably end up in you bettering yourself despite looking different than what other people may be doing at the time for their goals or actions. And this has been on my mind heavily because the media we consume all the time, it's brought to us through an algorithm, which by definition, I I went and looked it up. It's a process or a set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem solving operations, especially by a computer. So it's a set of rules. And I've just been, obviously, with me like stepping into sharing things in the digital space, there's advice and tips out there to do X, Y, and Z in order to grow your platform, wherever that may be. And if I feel that I'm called to be here by a higher power than myself, which, if you are really doing anything in life, whether you believe in God or not, in some sense, you believe you are being called by a higher power, because the motivation that's propelling you, if it is reliant on the things that you perceive here in the world, it runs dry really quick. And that's why you see people start doing an activity in order to get to something that they've seen or want, and then they give up after it starts to get hard. Because biblically, that would be similar to the statements in the Bible wherein it says people have certain grace, people have a certain portion of grace given to them in accordance to the calling that God places in their life. Like if someone, say Moses, for instance, he went up to the mountaintop to be near God. God instructed Moses to tell the people, no one else comes up here. In this instance, no one comes up here. The animals shouldn't be near here, nothing, or else they will die, literally die. And that speaks to when you're being propelled by a higher purpose than you deem of yourself as, how do I put that? When you're called by a divine reasoning, for instance, that's outside of yourself, you can disregard your feelings and hardships that come into your life more easily than you could if you didn't believe that you are striving for something that is not greater than yourself, right? And hi, Vaporama. How are we doing this morning? And so I've been spirit algorithm. I guess that's right. So the verses, I'm just going to read a couple today. It's the end of chapter 4 and then end of chapter 3, and we're just going to move to chapter 4 after this. It just says, Before this faith came, we were held prisoners by the law, locked up until faith should be revealed. So the law was put in charge to lead us to Christ, that we might be justified by faith. Now that faith has come, we are no longer under the supervision of the law. And obviously that speaks into what I'm getting at, wherein our faith should supersede the things that we perceive around us. For instance, yesterday, I took an impromptu PTO day for no other reason than I felt God just calling me to rest. And I don't know if that was accurate or not, to be honest with you. But something I do know, and it's stated in the Bible, it's biblically accurate to state that we are supposed to act on what God tells us. And God knows our heart. And that's what matters. And so yesterday I took an impromptu PTO day, and all I did was just talk to God all day and read the Bible. That's it. Nothing else. I didn't do my schedule. My schedule is packed, and there's stuff that I need done at work. And I just felt like I was called to rest. And that doesn't make any sense. There's stuff that I want. I have doors opening at my job now. There's assignments that I need done that I'm going to get done today. And if I believed in my own rituals, such as my schedule and the rules I've given myself, if I believed in them over what I believe the divine power that resides over my life, God's hand on me, then I wouldn't be able to take a rest day like that. I wouldn't. And I'm not advising people to do that. That's pertaining to me. That's also an example of the grace I have to do certain things in my life may be different than other people, right? And I was reading the Bible yesterday, like I was saying, and in the Bible, I was reading the story of David a lot. And one thing I noticed, him and Gideon, and a lot of the leaders in the Bible, they were leaders that didn't want to be leaders initially. A lot of them, it seemed to be. And a lot of them doubted themselves. And I think there's something to that. Also, I noticed David, when he was first a shepherd boy, right? He just looked after sheep and whatnot, and he was the youngest in his family. And he was anointed king. And so he was chosen by God for a position, told by God in an actual physical manner, where someone who was a prophet like anointed him physically, right? It wasn't just like he perceived God as saying this to him. He had actual physical actions right in front of his face. And so he knows he's going to be king someday. And yet, if you read the story of David, there's so many things that he has to go through in order to get to that position. He literally has to run from death, from betrayal, and all these things for a position that he knows God has for him. And that seems illogical to me. Even when you have a great faith. So let's say, for instance, I believe that God has a promotion in store for me at my job. And let's say that God came down from heaven and stood right in front of me and said, "You have a promotion coming." I'm like, "Okay." And then I go on and so forth and do my work. And then stuff starts happening in my company that's really challenging and traumatizing to me, both psychologically and emotionally. Maybe I'm getting abused by a coworker or my name's getting thrown under the bus. It could seem logical, both by a faith standard. It could seem logical by a faith standard to just disregard that and continue on regardless and do nothing about it. But when you look at David's story, he had to run from people trying to kill him and all these other things that were going on in his life for a position that God already had for him. And he told him in a very clear manner. So, which is kind of mind-blowing to think about. So even when God tells you that he has something for you, it doesn't mean that bad stuff isn't going to happen to you in the interim. And it's still going to take decisions to be made by you in order to get there. It's so crazy to me. That seemed crazy to me. And another thing I noticed was when he killed Goliath, all the weapons that were offered to him by Saul, obviously everyone knows that he didn't put on Saul's armor, blah, 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 right? Every pastor says that. No disrespect to them. But what I seen was he used the weapons that God, it's kind of the same message, but he used the weapons that God had already been familiarizing him with and building his skill with all the way up until then. He didn't call David to use the weapons everyone else was using to kill Goliath. And I was thinking about that in a sense of, well, being here in the digital landscape, right? Like, I've been more comfortable just going live like this than creating and editing clips, making little shorts and doing captions and whatnot. And I'm in a course that has very successful people teaching it, like Myron Golden, for instance, giving advice, and it's 100% good advice. And I can't shake the feeling that God doesn't want me to use the weapons that they're using. It's like, I was going on my walk this morning and I was just thinking, if I do certain things to please the algorithm, am I serving the algorithm or God? Am I just going to use the tactics and techniques which are taught to me through another source? Or am I going to use what God has always used to bring me through all the doors that he has up until now, which is my mind and how I think? Because like I've said earlier in a previous episode, where I've been in rooms with a lot of people that are very successful and have far greater influence than I do, both financially and in other means and subjects. And I just, I still find my way of thinking unique even among them when it comes to my faith in God and trusting him and whatnot. And I know that has to be on purpose, and there is purpose for that. And I could go with the crowd and do what everyone else is doing, right? And use the weapons everyone else does. But like David, and like it's stating in this verse in Galatians, when Jesus came, we're no longer under servitude of the law, under the laws that men are serving. We're now supposed to go by faith, right? And Yeah, it's stated in this version. It says, so the law was our guardian until Christ came, that we might be justified by faith. So we go by faith now, not by the law. Yep. Todd, hey, good morning, man. Yep, God chooses us. He knows our hearts. Stand alone, be yourself by yourself. That's true. And at the same time, that's also a slippery slope because God gave people, it's not good for man to be alone. It's not. And just to be transparent, my default mode is to be alone. I like physically training alone. Um, I like doing a lot of things alone. Part of that is because when I'm in the gym, I'm not trying to brag on myself, but I take myself to a place mentally wherein a lot of people just quit. But for instance, like when I was training for a fight for Muay Thai, I'd be on the air bike, that thing that goes like this, and I'm literally bawling as I'm doing it because I've been doing it so long that I just want to get off of it, but I won't. And I'm crying as I'm exercising because I just want to quit so bad, and I didn't. Most people in that situation would quit. And so I like to train alone because if I have to worry about someone else's mentality, um, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same. It's the same thing as people not having the same grace for things that God has called you to, right? It's the same thing. And I've been thinking a lot about that. How all the time we're like serving this law or our schedules, for instance. Like right now, I can't tell you how many times I've like redone my schedule because it just doesn't feel exactly right. And I think part of that has to do with anxiety and worry. And anxiety is like a disunion between your what you're striving for and what you're doing, right? It's disunion in your mind. And it's it's hard. It's so hard for me because I'm trying to do what I perceive as the higher power wanting me to do, God. And at the same time, I need to give myself grace, but He knows our hearts. So I don't think God really cares if we do the wrong thing as much as He cares where our hearts are at. And I've redone my schedule so many times, and I know that I've had to disobey what God has told me to serve my schedule before. I've done it. Like the odds are that I've done it 100%. I think we all do. I think people do that with their attention too, with the algorithm, online and everywhere else. Because that's what you see. If you go on YouTube, social media, anywhere, you're seeing what the algorithm wants you to see. They say it's formed around your own clicks and whatnot, but I'm just going to tell you, you'd be foolish if you didn't think that they are manipulating it in a manner to funnel you to where they want you to go. That's how they make money. It's a business. I don't blame them for it. And it's so hard to remove yourself from this world when a lot of goals that we have set up for ourselves are for things that are in this world. So we're supposed to drive ourselves through motivations that are divine when what we're wanting are things that are in this world. Therefore, it only seems logical to go by the playbooks that we can perceive and understand because we've seen them work. They're tested. The hypothesis, all these experiments, they have given results. We see it all the time. And I've done it myself. So it's like there's a part of your understanding that you have to sacrifice in order to really live by faith. And it's so hard. It's a constant battle. Like, I'm watching this roundtable discussion, and they described wrestling with God as how divine revelation is brought about. And man, that's so true. When I would think about when I was unemployed, which that whole process is what got me the job that I have now. And that was kind of the whole kickoff to my newfound volume of faith, right? Like when I gave everything up and I was just like, I've tried doing it my way for 30 years. I'm ready to try it your way. Like, dude, it's results. I just don't feel good. I'm like, I'll try it your way, man. I've done it myself for a long time. And I remember looking for a job when I was unemployed, just like crying on my bed and going to interviews and just like thinking that I heard God tell me this is the job. They're going to accept you. And I remember one time I had an interview with a company and it seemed really promising. And when you interview with companies, there can be like 2 or 3 weeks before they get back to you. And this was a government job that was a government defense contract job. And so if you know anything about those type of jobs, is those processes run really slow because there's a lot of red tape in those companies. And so it'd been like 2 or 3 weeks, and I totally thought that God told me that I got that job. So I was like not studying for other things, for other interviews that I could be doing. And finally, God had someone call me that was through another company that was kind of correlated with them through a different manner, that wanted me for a different job. He just had contacts there, and he found out that I didn't have the job there. And so he told me that. And I could have sat there and spun my wheels mentally forever, just like living on this seed of hope and faith of what I thought God told me. And I thank God so much for correcting me. But it's like I could have just sat there forever, for months, probably a couple. I did. It was like 2 or 3 weeks. It was almost a month sitting there waiting for that job, for that phone call. And God saved me from that. And I guess that kind of speaks to God will save you. But it also speaks to that you can misinterpret what you perceive God to say. And that took another human being to tell me that what I heard was wrong. And God uses other people. So that's an example of man being alone is not good. I hope that ties everything together. Does that make sense, Todd? Or Vaporama? Either of you? Does that make sense? I hope so. I am I've really been wrestling with God a lot lately, actually, through many things. And yeah, indeed. Thanks, Todd. And I know it's so hard striving for things, because you can be called to things, to do things on the earth for God. Therefore, the techniques you're going to be taught by other people that could be brought by God, they may be the best thing in that field for you to get to X, Y, or Z, but they're not the thing that you're supposed to do, because those weren't the weapons that God has been forming in you and using you to use this whole entire time. Your teachers don't always know your journey that happened before you got to them. God's flow, not ours. Exactly, Todd. That's so good. Your teachers know the weapons that they used, and they're teaching you those, the techniques to use those, the skills to use those. And it's hard. And I totally think that a lot of humanity, including myself, I fall short all the time. And I thank God that He has the grace to just like cover for our mistakes. Like I've been praying a lot for a lot of things lately, for direction, for clarity. And when I heard at that round table it discussed as wrestling with God is how divine revelations happen. That's why I was speaking to when I was on my bed, crying. And that was a wrestling with God that whole entire like 2-3 months being unemployed. It really was. The whole time I was wrestling with God because, like I said, I thought I would perceive Him as saying one thing, but He didn't say that. Or maybe He did. He just wanted me to get to one thing. And then He could He could have you perceive Him as saying one thing just so He can get you to said area to tell you the next thing. Because He knows you wouldn't go do the one thing without you perceiving Him as saying one thing, And it's all complicated and you get lost in it so easily. And the whole deal, it's like that moment of my life when I gave everything up to follow what God has for me. Man, it sucked. It was hard. I cried, got denied by so many companies, but God blessed me to have the job that I have now. And it's so amazing. And God's opening even more doors that I had written on that original prayer list now. Like things are coming to fruition now that I wrote down 4 years ago. It's crazy. And it's just like David, how he was like anointed to be king. Yet he had to run from death, from people, all these things. And I'm sure that he wrestled with God during that time, through prayer and everything else. And it's like the journey to the place where God has for you, the journey to the place that God has for you is not clean, It's messy and it hurts. Yeah, what we need God placed already inside of us. So that's interesting you say that. I don't know what I think about it because I've thought about that. I've thought about that. Because if we already have everything we need in us, if we really believe that, then it could just cause us to be stationary for a long time. And I know that God calls us to go do things that we don't have any familiarity with, things that we have to build a relationship with that require faith and a sacrifice of our own logical reasoning in order to get to where He's calling us. And He doesn't all the time tell us where we're going, right? Like David, for instance, he was anointed by Samuel, but Abraham, he was just told, go to the land where I will show you. God didn't tell him where. And those differences are interesting. So I think that displays that sometimes there are things that we need to acquire externally. God wants us to acquire externally. And maybe it may be a true statement that everything we need is in us, but it requires us to go to places that we haven't been before in order to wake them up, or we're required to go enact certain behavioral actions in order to wake those things up, right? Because just, let's say, just because I know how to draw doesn't mean I can make a masterpiece, right? Like sometimes you have to go to another place that you haven't been before in order to learn the things that, in order to master the things that God's already put in you. So I don't know. I don't know what I think about everything that we need is already in us. Because God created Adam and he then created Eve. So he had to look at Adam and be like, look, this isn't good alone. Right? If Adam had everything he needed already, why did he create Eve? I think there's something to that. I really do. And we can stay. And that also requires faith to believe. It 100% requires faith to believe that either could be true for you. And I think either could be the case for you in various instances, right? It's like, there are some cases where we need to isolate ourselves during some seasons, and then others where we shouldn't. And it requires faith to know what to do in your case. And we can just stay slaves forever to the methodologies and rituals that we see everyone else doing that worked for them, when your life, your path is unique to you. The things that happen to you. No one can truly relate to what happened to you in a sense that's as personal as you feel with the events that happened in your past, right? Like when something I've been reading is the outline of psychoanalysis by Sigmund Freud. And something that I came upon that like blew my mind away, and it was like kind of hit me in the face. I've had a psychologist for like a long time. And I've suffered from various things like depression, and I have ADHD and whatnot. And so, I've gone through the therapeutical methodology, and I have a passion for psychology myself. And something that I was reading in this outline is a psychiatrist or a psychologist in a therapy setting, you have to strategically choose when you give your assessment as to what is wrong with the patient. And you can't unload it all at once, or else the human reaction to the patient will be to reject all of it. And that's so true. If you have something in you that's bothering you, and then someone just sees straight through you and is like, yo, you should do X, Y, and Z because what you're doing now is hurting you. And I don't care if you're letting anyone else know it. I know it. If you tell that to someone that's in that place, they'll reject it immediately and they'll get angry. It like takes strategy, and it does take strategy and thought in order to bring in this depiction, to be your patient to a place where they are ready to receive the information of how to fix themselves. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing when you do things in life too. Like, you got to think of this path that you're on as you're acquiring information about what you need to do in order to get to where you want to be, in order to fulfill your dreams and goals in life. And God will give you what you need for where you're at in that journey, because if he laid it all on you all at once, you'd reject it immediately. That's also why he told Abraham, you will go to the land where I will show you. And I think it's different for every person, right? Like, because that's what he told Abraham. And I'm just realizing this now. But when he told David, he anointed him as a boy. But he didn't tell David, hey, you're going to have to run from people trying to murder you someday. You're going to have to do this, 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 and this, right? He told David that he will be king someday. And I wonder if that was because David had the sort of character and personality where he could drive through opposition knowing that he was going to get to said place. Whereas, and God had a specificity to that title for David. But Abraham didn't have that specificity. Maybe because that was God knew what type of character. Oh, Abraham didn't have that specificity when he said, I meant Abraham, not David the second time. Because he said, go to the land where I will show you. Because God knew that he had a character makeup wherein if he gave him specifics and details, he would reject it. So that was one person's, for Abraham, something like that would be a curse, whereas for David, it was a blessing, something he could use. That goes to the genius of God, right? And it also goes to not every person's journey or their methodology to get to said place is the same either. And that's so true. And because I know there's things that's why people kind of perceive me as being probably odd and weird, because I've come to a point in my life where I detach myself from situations a lot. Mentally, like if I'm in a given situation all the time, mentally, I think about what is actually going on. Like if I was me sitting here, for instance, watching myself speaking to this camera right now, or to you, Todd Vaporama, I would be like, what do I look like? What are they perceiving me as? Right? And I do that a lot, and sometimes it can come off as weird, but it's just how God has built me. And there's a reason he's built me like that, wherein he hasn't built another person to do that by default, Which I will say the strategy of detaching yourself from a situation will give you an advantage in life that will greatly help you in all situations. It's helped me so much because I used to just get lost in my emotions. And you got to have faith that God has built you the way he's built you. He's given you the weapons that he has given you. He's been building you up until now. And maybe you have been in a place where you haven't really even discovered what you're supposed to do or what techniques you're supposed to use. Maybe you're in a lull. Maybe you have no idea what's happening in your life or why you're even on this earth. It's like God knows what he's doing with you. And even if you have made mistakes all the way up until now, he can use all of that experiential learning, even if it's from mistakes, to bring about a greater future in your life. 100%. Don't be slaves to your own rules, your own schedule, the algorithm. None of it. We don't need that. We just need faith. That's right. Todd says, have faith and believe you will be fine. Not comfortable always, but victory will be yours. Absolutely. And your victory may not look like what you think it'll look like, but just obey what you perceive as God is telling you. And sometimes you have to filter that through others. Sometimes you have to filter that through tears and pain and heartbreak. But it's worth it in the end. It's worth it in the end. I think that's a good place to wrap up. I will be on tomorrow, I think around 8:30 a.m. probably. That's what I'm going to aim for. I'm still working with the schedule thing. And I love you all. Hey, I love you, Todd. And reach out if you need anything. I have all my contacts in my social media in the description. If you stayed this long, for those not watching on this live, I thank you. And this is just a journey. This isn't like other formats wherein I really want this to be a discussion between me and other people. I'm not looking for just me just teaching people stuff that's worked for me. I'm looking to create like an organic tool that we can all use and that we have all built together in order to better equip ourselves to interface with this world properly in the way that the Creator has intended. And even if you don't believe in a Creator, those type of discussions will be the best for you regardless. Because I think just like in a biblical depiction, wrestling with God is how divine revelation comes. It's the same thing among us. It's the same thing. Wrestling with each other in the same sort of manner in which those who believe in God wrestle with God, that is how revelation comes. And it's not through the ways that we are the same in which some things come to fruition. It's how we're different. It is not good for man to be alone. So that's what I'm trying to build here, is like a place where we can construct ideas together. There's so many people out there just telling you you should do X, Y, or Z. This is the rule. This is the law you should follow. Maybe that's why God has me in the book of Galatians to start out this journey here in the digital landscape, because I don't want to do that. I don't. I think there's enough of that out there. And there's so many people that try to put on one shoe that fits somebody else, but it doesn't fit them. And they'll hurt their foot. Running in that, if you try to run in shoes that aren't your size, as someone that runs like 3 miles like multiple times a week, you'll hurt your foot. That makes sense. So, yep. I'm in a relentless pursuit of truth. And I just want you to join me. I love you, and I thank you all. You have a great rest of your day. Todd, I'll talk to you in the chats, I'm sure. And God bless you. Thank you, Jesus, for everything. And I do hope that regardless of what you believe, I do obviously hope that you come to God someday and give that a chance. But regardless, I hope this reaches you well. And if you're going through hardship, if you enact with it properly and have the right mind about it, you will get to the promised land. God will help you. I love you. I'll see you next time. Tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Peace.